So I called Paul up and I said, Paul, this really bothers me. He said it like in 50 interviews all over the world. He said, why is he saying that? He says, I can't control Gene. I mean, Gene, says whatever he wants to say. I said, well, tell him to go F himself, okay?
We'll start with the first hit, the first blockbuster that really put you on the map. And it doesn't get much bigger nowadays, thinking back, than Kiss, and I Was Made for Loving You. Now, you first met Paul Stanley, I think it says in the book, when he came backstage after one of your shows. Is that correct?
That's right. Desmond Child and Rouge was performing at a little club called Trax, Trax, on West 72nd Street. It was literally an underground club, underground. And we were getting ready to go on. The dressing room was behind the front curtain. So it was like the stage was right there. And this guy like pokes his head in, pulls the curtain open. He said, "Hey, I'm Paul Stanley of Kiss." And it's like we're looking at him like we didn't know what he looked like, because in those days they never showed their faces. And so he said, "I just want to let you guys know that George Harrison of the Beatles is in the front table." It was like, wow. I had like a narcolepsy attack. I just wanted to take a little nap. I was just like so nervous. And we went out there and killed it. And then Paul came backstage afterward and said, "Hey, we should try writing a song together." And jokingly, I said, "Okay, well, why don't you, we were starting recording our first album. I said, why don't you write a song with us for our first album, which is we're doing now, and then I'll write a song with you." And he like looked at me kind of funny. Well, we co-wrote a song called "The Fight," a song I had started with David Landau, John Landau's brother, who was our guitarist. And then it was his turn. So he said, okay, come to SIR. And they were rehearsing, their Kiss was rehearsing. So I walked in, and there was a piano on the left-hand side of the stage with a big, heavy canvas cover. No need for a piano in Kiss, right? So he helped me pull the cover off, and then we sat together side by side, and we started writing "I Was Made for Loving You," which in the end, it was a very revolutionary song, because he was very influenced growing up with the sound of Motown. And so, if you listen to "I Was Made for Loving You," you can almost hear this, the feeling of standing in the shadow of love. "I was made for loving you," standing in the shadow of love. And so, we decided to try to put that Motown sound, that dance beat, heavy dance beat with rock guitars. And nobody had done that before. And that opened the door to really the music that followed, in the 80s, from Prince and Madonna and Michael Jackson, Beat It, all of that. That happened because our song was so extraordinary, and it was, a hit all around the world. I recently found out that the only place it actually went to #1 was Australia. How cool is that?
Yeah.
But it was, #2, #3. It was in the top 5 everywhere in the world. And to this day, it's the most successful Kiss song of history.
It's incredible, isn't it? But I think it caused a bit of contra. Oh, sorry.
And Gene Simmons hated the song.
Yes, he
To
did
this day.
indeed. Tell us about that, Dan, because he said some not very nice things about it, hasn't he, over the years?
Yes, I mean, I think it was more like, his shtick, like having to have something to say in an interview. And so at one point he was, he made an album produced by my great friend Bob Ezrin called "The Elder." And so their whole thing was, because I was having all of this success with Bon Jovi and Aerosmith. And so he was looking at all the success, and his shtick for that record was, we don't need collaborators. We don't need co-writers. In fact, we paid guards to stand at the door of the studio to keep Desmond Child out. And it was like, I read that and it's like, why would he slag the person that's put money in his pocket? It was like, so I mean, at that time, now I understand his humor
Mhm.
and kind of think it's funny. But at that time, I was very hurt. So I called Paul up and I said, Paul, this really bothers me. He said it like in 50 interviews all over the world. He said, why is he saying that? He says, I can't control Gene. I mean, Gene, says whatever he wants to say. I said, well, tell him to go F himself, okay? And so later on that afternoon, I checked my answering machine. We didn't have voicemail
Yeah.
then. And I heard like 4 words. Hi, it's Gene. Sorry. Click. And that was probably the only apology he ever gave in his entire life for anything.
So obviously you say now you know him better. I mean, obviously things are a lot better between you two in the last few years since then.
Oh, I mean, he's always very nice to me when I see him. He's like, he's the kind of guy, he's very big, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm almost 6 foot tall, but he towers over me. And, who knows what kind of platform shoes are going on underneath that as well, right? But, he's like, he comes up and when he talks to you, he gets up closer and closer and closer and closer. And he's right in your face. And he, shakes my hand, like almost crushes it. And he says, you're a very attractive and very talented young man. And then he'll walk away.
Brilliant stuff. But you worked with Kiss again throughout the 80s, didn't you? The albums Animalize and I think Asylum were a couple of the records you worked with. So
Well,
how did you approach those ones?
well, I didn't work with Kiss. I
Okay.
co-wrote with Paul Stanley.
Okay.
And Paul would bring his songs that he co-wrote with, he co-wrote with various other co-writers. And I was one of his favorite. And he'd bring them to the table and he'd usually get maybe half the record with songs he had collaborated on. And so that's how it happened. But I owe everything to Paul because he's the one that introduced me to Bon Jovi. He's the one that opened the door and also taught me how to write stadium anthems the Kiss way, which is the protagonist can never be the victim. He always has to be the winner. The songs have to feel uplifting, and a lot of them are tongue in cheek, like Heaven's on Fire, which we co-wrote, and also the idea of writing songs that had opposites, like Heaven's on Fire and Who Wants to Be Lonely, like they have tension of opposites within the words, which then I applied to the titles that I brought to my writing sessions with Bon Jovi. The very first song we wrote was You Give Love a Bad Name.